Life. A constant ebb and flow of good and bad experiences. We spend hours scrolling, watching perfect highlight reels of people's lives. I've been a storyteller for 9 years. I have yet to meet a person who hasn't had a dark shadow cast over their soul from staring death or trauma in the face, myself included. In sharing my experiences, I've gained tools for days when those shadows get a little too dark. I'm Paulina Bootska, and this is not your typical mental health podcast. We all have a story. It's time to start using yours for your revival.
Hey, it's Joy and Phil here. We're just sliding in through your weekend.
When I look at Joy and Phil, the choice to love despite the abyss of grief is somewhat of a marvel to me. There's a physical breaking you feel inside when you're met with shock.
Our therapist told us it's an average of 18 months where you're drowning.
13 days before my 21st birthday, October 28th, 2011, was the day when my life changed in an instant. A mad dash to save my father's life. We didn't get there in time. Instead, we were met with police cars, a blood-spattered room, and the body already removed. The suicide itself was heartbreaking, but it was the fallout from my dad's actions that are haunting and still keep me in therapy today. The sight of the blood bubbling beneath my brother's fingers as he sobbed in the spot where my dad took his last breath. My mom's blood-curdling screams as she dropped to her knees when I told her he was gone is something I relive every time I think of that moment. She wanted to take her own life too, and for months my brother and I took shifts keeping her alive. Frankly, you could have gutted me from my stomach to my chest cavity, and it would have hurt less than watching my family deteriorate in front of my eyes.
This is a roadblock. This is painful. This is brutal right now, but it won't always be like this. This is just temporary. And grief does teach us that.
In my darkest days came the biggest lessons on love and family. To love is to let someone fall apart in the only way they know how. To go completely unhinged in a situation they're unprepared for, and just let them feel every gut-wrenching moment.
You can barely breathe and not get the waves sucked into your lungs.
But these two have taken their pain and their grief and found joy and solutions to problems no one prepared us for.
This might look like your everyday lipstick, but it's not what you think.
Please welcome Joy and Phil Hoover, founders of Esões Cosmetics, a date rape detection lipstick.
I did.
So we've had a wild journey in the last 20 years, but specifically in Las Vegas. We've been in Vegas 14 years, and
we came to town on January 2nd of 2010.
Yep, exactly. We started right away when we moved to Las Vegas. We started serving people working in the adult industry, folks experiencing gender-based violence, and we were both very passionate about providing resources to a community that was very underserved, undersupported, and truly people were dying. People were losing their lives because of violence, and there was no resources. From 2010 to 2013, we spent time serving our community and stepping in and really starting to care about this issue because of the people that we were serving. And then on April 10th of 2013, it became extremely personal to us.
What does that mean?
Yeah.
Okay, let's go. We had let's step back 8 days before that. Gave birth to our first daughter, lovely little Vivian. She's incredible. And then 8 days later, like she said, we got a phone call that my dad, who I grew up in a very, very violent home. And even now, we're just starting to realize more. I'm 45 years old now. I'm starting to realize more and more, wow. Looking back at it going, it's pretty messed up. The way that I grew up, violence in the home consistently, watching my dad physically assault my mom, my older brother, myself, and my younger sister. But on that day, in April, I like to say that he just kind of lost connection with reality. We don't know exactly what happened because I've never read the police report, but he used a firearm, and he ended the life of my mom, and then ended my brother's life, and then ended his own life with a firearm. So here we are, living our lives in Las Vegas, Nevada, trying to help as many people as we can. going through this amazing experience of just having our first child, and then the world kind of crumbled. Like it just kind of like exploded around us. And yeah, we ended up flying to Michigan a couple days later. So 10-day-old little baby. We had to get special permission from Joy's doctor just to take her. And it was quite, I will say, quite an experience that we've been now in therapy since then.
Yeah.
Working through it for ourselves, for our kids, for our community, because we still do the work that we do in Las Vegas. We still do it here. We've in our newest project, we've actually taken it nationwide now, which is really cool for us to kind of get out of just the Vegas, the hub that we had here.
But it was weird because the first couple of years we were here in Las Vegas, we were the 911 phone call for so many women who were experiencing trauma and violence. And then 3 years later, his mom's final words are in a 911 phone call, and we can't do anything about it.
Yeah.
It was the end. And that is something that we've had to work through a lot because, you always wish, you always hope that you can help, that you can save someone's life, that you can step in. And, the more work that we do around this, the more we realize, like, sometimes you can and sometimes you can't. But that's what we've dedicated our life to, is doing what we can every single time.
Yeah.
So I met Phil first, actually, on a story that I was doing about parents and working and kind of childcare. And Phil stays at home. Joy kind of took on the foundation. I don't even know how we got from childcare to kind of what your story is, but I think he was pitching you, actually, Joy.
Yeah.
Phil was like, you have to meet my wife. She's this badass, and she started this company. And then he started talking to me about kind of how the company got started and how we got here. And he had no clue. I'd never met him, and that so much of his story was so much of my story.
Yeah.
It's super interesting because you say that. Like, so much of my story is your story. So much of your story is Joy's story. Like, we all have these stories that all kind of blend together. And when we connect with people, we go, I have part of that. Like, I've experienced some of that. So there's like this connection that happens where we go one human to another. Like, I'm sorry that happened to you. Yeah, I'm sorry that happened to you too. How can we now join together and make sure it's not happening as much as it was to us, as whether it's as kids or as adults? Like, what has happened in our life that we can give our assistance or guidance or whatever it is, just to share our story and help someone else through it.
Yeah.
And that shared experience, that really is how we got here, how the podcast got started. I think it was the first time in my life where there are parts of my story, my dad's suicide story, that I talked about very openly. But there are parts I don't talk about, right? Like the fact that his suicide almost did turn into a murder-suicide 5 days prior to his death. And so I think it was the first time that I'd ever talked to somebody who kind of was like, experienced that. And I think I wanted to almost just kind of keep picking your brain and being like, how did you get through it? Like, because I'm here 13 years later. Or, I mean, at that point, it was like 11 years later, and I was like, I don't know that I've got it together. And you guys seem to not only have a business, and you're moving through it, and you got kids, and you're like, you're making it work. And I'm like, shit, some days it's like this, or I want to cry, and some days I'm like, that's what happened. That's just part of my story. So what did you guys do in the wake of everything, having to deal with being new parents, having to deal with grief, having to deal with a homicide, having to deal with not one burial, but 3.
Some days we don't even know.
Yeah.
Honestly.
It's interesting because I remember getting on an airplane and I had Vivian in a sling really close to me. Obviously, she was tiny, 8 pounds. And a lot of people were like, why would you take your baby on an airplane so young? Like, you get these, because people have no idea. And I think that that's a really important thing to learn, is that we know no one knows anyone's story. And so, like, making flippant comments like that, like, I didn't even say anything because I couldn't. I was just like, I'm just trying to survive right now. Like, I'm just trying to get on this plane. And it's interesting because I remember us, like, getting into Grand Rapids, Michigan, getting in a car that we were borrowing from someone and, like, driving. And, like, I remember Phil just looking at me and going, like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. And I'm like, me either. But I remember us saying one thing that we said a lot, especially in those early moments, was like literally just one breath, one step at a time. Because anything else felt really impossible. And, you know, we had to go right there. We had to go meet with the funeral home. The funeral home said they said we've never done 3 funerals at one time, like three for the same family.
Can I tell you how fucked up it is to walk into a funeral home and I remember it so clearly. You walk in the front door, and my brother's casket was to the left, my mom's casket was straight ahead, and my dad's casket was to the right. And I'm like, how do you even wrap your mind around that?
Yeah.
Like, even now I still go like, this isn't. There's sometimes, I'm sure you go through this too, there's some times where you go, this isn't real. That wasn't real.
Mm-hmm.
That was somebody's story. Like, I heard about it somewhere.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's been incredible. I think for us, obviously therapy was one of the main things that we've done. We, every 2 weeks, we actually just switched this year. We switched to once a month now because that's what we feel like we can do. But to Joy's point too, like, no one really knows. Like, she's walking onto an airplane carrying a baby, and people are like giving her this stink eye, going like, why are you doing this? I had this moment where I actually worked at the fashion show mall here in Las Vegas at a big tech retailer. And I remember riding down an escalator on my way back from lunch. And I started looking around at all these people, and I just said to myself, I was like, this was a month after. And I looked around, and all these people are just going about their day. And I'm like, none of these people know, nor do they care, that my life like crumbled in an instant. But what that did for me is it allowed me to go, what can I learn from this? Because I think that's the most important thing that we can do, is like learn from every situation that we're in. So I said to myself, what can I learn from this? And what I learned from it was, I need to be able to understand, like, if somebody's having a bad day, I have no idea. And we all know it, like, hey, you know what, never know what's going on in somebody's life. But for real, we don't.
Yeah.
We don't know if there's abuse at home. We don't know if a family member just died. We don't know if they just went bankrupt. And we have no idea what's happening in their lives. And they could be just acting horribly to us because of the hurt that they have inside that they're just not working on yet. So for both of us, yeah, one of the ways that we've got through it is like kind of relying on our community and then doing the deep, deep, hurtful work inside, like really pulling out all the junk that we feel for whatever reason towards my dad and towards other folks in our lives that have hurt us.
There was this one moment the night before the funerals. So we had the wake all day, which we had 3 different wakes because they didn't want, like, you know, his brother's bar buddies to be in a room with his murderer, right? But then they wanted to do a funeral, and the funeral was all together for all 3 of them. And I remember the night before, we went out and we had to get like clothes. We were in Michigan. It was cold. We had nothing warm. We're flying in from Vegas. But I started to see him dip, like a low that I had never seen. And I started to get, here we are, new parents. And I'm like, are we going to make it? Like, are we personally going to make it? Our relationship? Are we going to be able to raise this kid? And I remember this moment where he looked at me. And it was like this like snap of reality. And he just looked at me and he said, I know that I have 2 choices right now. I can bury myself in this dark hole and no one will ever fault me for it. That I will always be the guy whose dad killed his family. Like, it will be okay for me to do that.
Yeah, I told her, I literally is like, I can be an asshole for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And no one could ever.
Because you take it on. You take it on as a person.
Yeah.
It's almost like I don't know, it may be the wrong word, but like a superhero thing that you take.
Yeah.
You're like, fuck you.
Yep.
Yeah,
This is what
literally,
I've been
like,
through.
you can't say anything to me.
Or he said, or I can lift my head up, like I can move forward and be the best dad and the best husband that I can be.
And the reason I did that is because I saw such a shitty example of it. Like, I did not have a good example of a father or a husband. So I've then gone to other people that I go like, you are where I want to be. You are a great parent. How do I parent like you? I see that you're a great husband to your wife. How do you do that? And then a lot of it is then us going back and forth going, what do we want? How do we want to make our life? So
I think that point in the story is a very pivotal point because I could see the shift from like I have no choice but to feel the darkness, to like, I have a choice to be the light and to step into the light. And we call it flashlights, like find the flashlights around us until you can, be lit yourself. And we go back to that a lot because people always ask him, like, how did you survive? How did you guys raise your baby? How are you guys still married? And it's like, it really was that turning point of like, we are going to live. And interestingly enough, Vivian, our daughter's name means life.
Wow.
And we had no idea when we named her that, which we named her that literally we
Months before.
actually before we even had got pregnant. We knew we wanted a daughter named Vivian. So when I got pregnant, it took a long time. So we had been like hoping and praying and believing for this baby, and we got pregnant, and we're like, that's our Vivian, and I remember my mom being like, what if it's a boy, like how rude? And I'm like, nope, it's Vivian, and it was Vivian, and we had no idea how much we needed her. And the fact that she was actually born early because of a condition that I had in pregnancy, so we had 8 days with her versus like I would have basically been in labor if not.
Everything happened.
So the way things worked out, it's just like, it's just amazing to really like to look at it.
You touched on, Joy, exactly what I was going to ask you, which was kind of how did you guys survive this? Because even hearing kind of what that realization that Phil you had, I have one option or the other. I know in the wake of when my dad died, I had that same realization, and I said, I will not let another family go through what we're going through. Like it was so devastating and heartbreaking because we didn't have anybody around us, and we were in the public eye to some degree because my mom had a business. Both my parents had businesses. We're in a very tight-knit Polish community, so everybody knows each other. Everybody knows my parents.
Yeah.
I remember being in a relationship at that point, and I remember my partner at that. He was phenomenal. He was great, and he was like, "I'm here with you, and I love you, and I'm going to be here for you." But to some point, I almost felt like he had to stay with me because of what happened.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering, kind of, I spent a long time running away from my issues and kind of diving into work, and knowing that one day I will help people with what I've been through. Just 10 years ago was not the time, you know, kind of thing. And so I think it's interesting when I look at other people who've been through this. How did you not break? How did you keep going? How did you stay a father? How did you stay a couple? How did you stay committed, connected? Because you didn't only have the trauma of these 3 events that just happened. You had the trauma of your whole childhood to also go through. And Joy, you had your own traumas too, and we haven't even gotten to those. So there was trauma on both ends, and you guys are now not only created life, but are mourning 3 lives. Yeah. How do you, man, like when I think about it, holy fuck, how do you, like seriously, how do you unpack that?
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's something that I've said a long time ago, which is like, when you know the depth of like the darkness, the light feels brighter, I guess. And so like, I think that is what happened to us, is that while we had many of dark days, we found the light, and literally we're still doing it. Like we found the light in sunrises, in sunsets, in like the love of our community, in like in our family we started a game early on called I Love You Because. And so we go around in a circle, and like usually at holidays and stuff, but then just randomly, like at least a couple times a month, where we'll say like, let's play I Love You Because, and we'll say like something we love about each other, and then what we love about ourselves. I'm a believer that love is the only healer. Absolutely. And when I say we loved each other back to life, and we've done that over and over, I mean that like with everything within me, because like neither of us had any idea how to help each other through that time. I actually remember walking, I don't know if you remember this, walking through Mandalay Bay a few months after this happened, and we have, Vivian, she's in the sling, and we're walking, and we got in an argument, and I was like really upset, and I just looked at him and I was like, you have no idea what I'm going through. And he's like, because I'm postpartum and I'm trying to help him.
No, I don't.
And we're 3 years into running a nonprofit, making literally no money. Like we actually had people help pay our rent the first month because we couldn't work, and because we had to be there for like 21 days doing the funerals and the burials and all that. And he looked at me, he's like, you have no fucking idea what I'm going through. Like, it was just so, like, poignant.
Yeah.
Where it was like, oh my God, yeah. Like, we literally just, like, we just started hugging each other, like, in the middle of, like, Mandalay Bay parking lot and crying and being like, we don't know what each other are going through. We don't know how we're going to do this, but, like, we're not, we kept saying, we're on the same team.
Yeah.
We're not against each other. Like, we both have a ton of shit to work through, and, like, we just have to do it.
It's interesting. Joy mentioned that our daughter's name is Vivian, and that means, like, kind of life, but her middle name is Grace. Her name is Vivian Grace. And I think that fits so well too, because what we learned is, like, how do we have grace for each other?
Yeah.
So when she was postpartum, like, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to help. Like, I don't even know if I can help right now.
Mm-hmm.
And she's looking at me going, I have no idea what you're going through. Like, there's almost no one in the world that has experienced what we have gone through. Like, to have 3 deaths in a family, like, overnight.
Yeah.
So we've learned to have grace not only for each other, but also for ourselves. When we have those moments where we're like, I'm so fucking pissed off right now that this happened. Whatever that act out looks like, for her to go, I see it and I understand. What can I do to help? Like, what can I do for you right now? And yeah, I think we've walked through that so much, and we've made that a practice in our life now, where Joy actually talks about this phrase, like, never a failure, always a lesson. And I'm like, that's what we've done. We've learned how from this, God, I wish it wouldn't have happened, but we've learned from it. We've learned how to, I think, have more patience with people, have more grace for people, just to genuinely love people more. And that's all we're trying to do now.
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't forget what happened, right? That's the thing. You don't ever forget. Yeah. For me, at least, on my healing journey, for a long time, I thought, okay, well, I cried 5 years ago, so I should be fine. I cried this day, so I should be fine. That's not how that works. Like, you're like, this will fucking haunt you forever.
Yeah.
And, like, some days it will come in the most inopportune time when you're, like, in the middle of something, and it's like, oh shit, I really didn't want that fucking memory to come up right now, right? Like, how do you combat those memories when they do come up, guys?
We've been in therapy, and one of the things that we've learned is that grief is kind of like an ocean. And I think a lot of times people want to get on the wave and try to get over it. You don't get over it. You don't get, no matter what it is. If you lost your grandmother at 99 years old from natural causes, and she lived this amazing life, and then she died, you're not going to get over it. It's just part of your life now. But what we've learned to do is, when those waves of grief come, whatever they are, and there's been other points of grief in our life. Hell, so we had our second daughter in 2016.
Yeah, so we lost his family in April of 2013. And then in November of 2014, we lost a son. So I was pregnant with a boy, and we were in a midterm, basically just my body couldn't do it. And that I had a condition, and it was, it was complicated, but we ended up having surgery, and, like, they removed the baby from me, and, like, it was just that was, like, so overwhelming. So it was like, it's like, the weird part about our story is that we can't have a baby without loss with it. So, like, Vivian was born, and 8 days later, we lost his dad and his mom, his brother. We lost our second son. And then we got pregnant with our rainbow baby, Ruby, kind of miraculously. We didn't know if we would be able to have more kids. And we were literally, like, begging God, the universe, like, please give us this third baby with no trauma. 2016, like, this is our year, And Ruby was born on November 4th, 2016. My dad died of a massive heart attack 10 weeks later. So Vivian and Ruby wore the same outfit to our dad's funerals. Obviously, different circumstances. My dad was healthy, though. Like, he was cross-country skiing. Like we had just talked to him on FaceTime and he was like kissing like through the FaceTime my daughters and us and talking and stuff. And so it was just like, are we like doomed? Like like are
Cursed.
we yeah. And it was like unreal, really.
But what we have learned is you cannot go over the wave. You
Yeah.
have sometimes you just have to dive straight into like a surfer. If you've ever seen a surfer, like as they're going out, they're trying to get past the break, get on their board and they paddle. And sometimes they have to go right into the wave, and sometimes they get trashed. But as you have more experience going through grief, you can learn to dive into the wave, experience it, experience that grief, experience the hurt, and then you kind of like pop up the other side and you're like, okay, I can breathe again. Like, and you take a big breath of air and then you celebrate. So that's you asked, like, what are some of the things that we've done? We try to celebrate as much as we can. Like, not only like the big, huge things, but like, let's celebrate the little things. Like, let's have some fun with our family and play these silly little games that fill our souls up. Like, I love you because.
I was looking for it because there's this like really beautiful December 2016, this artist named Mary Ann Perone came out with a poem called Christmas at Midlife. And it goes into like, I'm no longer waiting for a special occasion. I burn the best candles on the ordinary days, like all these things. But one of the lines in it was so powerful to us, and it was, I'm no longer waiting for the other shoe to drop. It already did, and I survived. And I think, one thing that our therapist told us early on when we felt like, are we literally doomed? Like, are we going to just have people keep dying? And like, is this just going to be like, can we even survive this? I remember my mom saying, like, I'm worried you're not even going to be able to survive this. When we flew home to
Us
Michigan with
too.
a newborn again,
Us
at
too.
least she was 9 weeks old. Um, and our therapist said this: life, good and bad in life, is like train tracks. Both are always moving forward. And growing up in fundamentalist religion, we were kind of taught like it's, like things happen because you're doing good things in the world, and like things, it's like they view it as like you're kind of going against the powers of darkness with your light and all this stuff. And in thinking that way, it didn't feel possible to survive because we're like, well, we're always going to do good, so are we just going to have people die and trauma all the time? But with our therapist saying, good and bad are always moving forward in life. It was easier for us to say, okay, just as much as this could happen, this could. And I actually for like a year, I listened to this like lyric or this like it was like just a few second song, and it went over and over and over saying, as surely as a sun rises, as surely as it sets, we anticipate the goodness, we anticipate the rest. And so like I'm telling you, the sunrise, sunset, that has been a huge part of our healing, because there were days where even surviving from sunrise to sunset felt impossible. I literally would set on my iPhone watch where it would give me the time the sun would set, and then it would move into the time the sun would rise, because sometimes the nights were really hard, right? Because it's like it's hard to go to sleep thinking about things, and it's hard to wake up and remember, oh my God, what the fuck happened to us? And so waking up to see the sunrise reminded me that there is good, and there is like, as surely as the sun will rise and will set, like we're going to anticipate the good, not just the trauma or the pain. And I think that has been pivotal for us to want to wake up another day, to want to take care of each other another day, to want to love each other harder, to get through the next day.
In those moments of grief, I think, Joy, you hit it out of the ballpark when you said it is as hard as literally making it through the day. Sometimes it's just surviving that first minute, that hour, those first 15 minutes. And it's celebrating that too, right? Because in that first year you forget to celebrate, you forget to live, you forget to breathe, you forget to really function,
Mm-hmm.
and so it really is celebrating, like giving yourself that grace to sit with it and say, okay, today I was happy. I remember the first time I smiled after.
Yeah, get
Yeah.
it out, let it go. I know exactly what you're talking about.
You're like, you feel guilty
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
for smiling, and like, oh, I didn't expect that. But yeah, so I feel like in those moments, it is just kind of taking that second and being like, okay, today I smiled for the first time in 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
Today I saw the sun for the first time in 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
it's taking that time to just give yourself the grace and give yourself that moment of acknowledgement that it's shitty. It's fucking shitty as hell.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not going to get better in terms of like the situation's not, you're not going to wake up tomorrow and it's going to change. No, it's still going to be the reality that you wake up to, but you can rearrange your mind frame around it. And you start by taking those little moments, and those little moments add up to big steps.
Absolutely. It's a discipline of hope.
Yep.
That's really what we call it. Because hope doesn't just come, especially in those moments when you know the darkness and you're like, what the fuck else is going to happen now?
You feel it. You swim in it, right? You're kind of like, there is no knowing it. You're kind of, when you've felt or you've experienced or you've witnessed that kind of darkness, you shake hands with it and you're like, I see you, I hear you, and I know you're coming for me,
Yep.
but I'm going to stand up and I'm going to say this, you're not coming for me. You know,
Right.
like there's a power that you have to take in that moment. You had said also, Joe, one of the things is like, you know, are we attracting, or is this going to keep happening, this death and life and death? It's interesting because our Polish culture very much believes that in order for a new life to arrive, someone has to go.
Interesting. Our daughter Vivian, obviously, I used to feel a ton of guilt because I was like, wow, this baby was literally born into like horrible, horrible trauma and death. And does she feel it? And how will it impact her? And it has impacted her to be literally one of the most emotionally connected human beings.
Wild.
When she was 18 months old, I have it on video because it was actually right after we lost our son. She couldn't even talk that good, but she started feeling emotions in her words. So she'd go, I would say, what is it like if mommy's sad? And she'd go, mommy's sad. Mommy's sad. And she would like show her face. And then I would say, well, what if I'm happy? She'd go, Mama's happy. And it was like the way that she understood emotion and that she would come up to us, and the way that she, like, I really believe that she loved us through, like, I think it would have been almost impossible to get through those few years without her, because one, you're living for someone else now. You're not living for yourself. So I think that helped us a lot. And two, these kids are magical. They're hard as hell and they're magical all in one. And there were so many moments, right, that we're waking up to this little baby and the smiles and then the toddler and then the moments of life where she reminded us that, like, you know, it's easy to look for the little moments with kids because they look for them too. They're amazed at them, you know, like the first taste of pizza or like the first, you know, like her and I always did sunrise and sunsets together. And so it is, while I'm like, man, it would have been nice in our lifetime to have a baby without trauma. In the same sense, those babies are what saved us because they were the light when we didn't have it in us.
There are times when we had to, and I think we still do, we actively search out life. We actively search out light. Like there are literally still, even now, I'll look outside and be like, wow, like we just had rain in Las Vegas for quite a while, a couple weeks ago. It was just rain. And then there was these moments where the sun would break through, and I would, if I was like in the kitchen or whatever, cooking lunch, I'd look out the window and I would see the sun and I would be like, Joy, let's go outside real quick. And we would just stand outside and just close our eyes and just face the sun and just sit there for a moment and take a breath. It's the idea of like stopping to smell the roses. That's exactly what it is. Take a moment, experience something in nature. Like we love going, we have in Las Vegas here, we have just a little ways away, we have Mount Charleston. So we go to Mount Charleston whenever we can, and our kids have fallen in love with it. And we're up there just going, breathe in, breathe out.
Yeah.
Take the deepest breath that you can and feel the air. Notice what is in the air. Like, is it cool on your lungs? Is it warm? And then feeling the ground underneath your feet. Like we do a lot of like grounding exercises, just taking a moment to say, I am here. I am still here. I'm not going anywhere.
Every trauma that I've been through, the first thing that I do is I go walk.
Yeah.
Any life event, anything like that, I take the dog. She's loved me being it went since I've been out of news. She has loved it. We've been 2 hour walking every day, and it's prayers, meditations, and just being
Yep.
outside,
Mm-hmm.
letting that air hit you, grounding yourself, letting that sunlight hit you, and really just saying, there's something still bigger outside of my own understanding
Mm-hmm.
that's going on here, and I just have to keep moving. Like there, you don't have the option to stop because,
Yeah.
quite frankly, I mean, Joy, what were you going to do? Phil, what were you going to do? Stop
Yeah.
and do the same thing your dad did?
Right.
Joy, you had a baby, like
Right.
same for you. Like there
Mm-hmm.
wasn't really another option, and I think that's the thing. And when life happens, when trauma happens, you don't have an option as to what you do afterwards. It's kind of, you're going to keep moving.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now how you take that trauma and what you do with it, that's on you. But you got to keep moving.
We have, and sometimes it is put your head down and go, I fucking hate doing this right now.
Yeah.
But you just have to, sometimes you just have to do it. You just have to
Yeah.
keep, like you said, keep on moving forward, like one step at a time. We actually, we learned something the other day. We're actually looking into AMDR therapy.
EMDR.
EMDR.
EMDR, phenomenal.
We were talking to,
Some therapists.
yeah, and they basically, yeah, you tell it. You were there.
We were talking to some therapists about EMDR, and they were saying that actually there's a motion that when you step and you step in the same, basically like
Pattern.
the same pattern, that it does the same thing to your brain to like release, like whether it is like release emotion,
Yeah,
right?
it literally allows you to think deeper. Like, so when you're going on walks and you're like step, 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 that repetitive motion of your feet is allowing your brain to go, okay, I'm just going, because you're not even thinking about stepping anymore. You're just going. And then your brain starts to think about all these other things, and then you can start to process.
Yeah.
And you can start to learn through that. So we're the physicality of emotional healing is something that we're learning more and more about now, and realizing like there's so many things that we've like, you know what it's like when you're like, wow, today was shit, I'm gonna go home and I'm gonna take a hot shower or a hot bath, and you're like, this feels good, let it all, that's what you're doing in that. You're going, let all this stuff, like, I'm making an effort
Yeah.
to let it all
Yeah.
just go down the drain with the
Yeah.
water that's coming off.
The other thing I would say too is that we learn to hold space for each other. And I think like in the world, we're not good at like allowing people to be sad, right? Like it feels uncomfortable. And so, here we are, people are like, I remember our neighbor below us was like, we got back from the funerals. He was like, we noticed you were gone for a while. Like, like
You on vacation?
where were you? What'd you guys do? Right. And like, the guy was like super crabby with us for like we weren't
whole
super
time we
close
were-
with them. They were just kind of nosy, and so kind of saying it like that. And then we're like say what happens, right? And this has been like our whole life, where it's like we're saying something that's what happened, and people are like so taken aback because it's a horrible thing. But we have learned to hold space for ourselves and hold space for other people's pain, to allow us to be sad, to be angry, to go through all the stages of grief. And you said it, right? Where it's like, it's so much easier to just put yourself into work, put yourself into busyness. Like, it's interesting. After my nonprofit career ended in 2021, I realized like how much stuff I was holding from like 11 and a half years, to the point it got to where he would, in like my 11th year, he would be like, babe, you haven't cried in so long. Like, you need to cry this weekend. Like, I want to hold space to figure out how you can cry. Like, you got to cry. But it was those kinds of things where it was like we knew we had to release emotion and hold a safe space for each other to do that. And I think what was beautiful for us is that we did grieve differently, and we grieved often at different times. So we were able to hold that space separately for each other.
That's I think for us, that is one of the ways, like you asked, like how have you made it through as a couple, like that's one of the ways that we've done it. We've relied on each other to be that balance for when one of us is off. And I realize like not everybody that goes through trauma has that ability to like lean on someone else. Hopefully they have like a friend or a family member that they can lean on. But for us, if I'm off, if my balance is off, she's like, hey, what's going on? Like allowing me to talk about it. And then we reverse that. If she's feeling like you're not you're not like, and I want to say the word normal because that's not what it is. No one's normal.
Yeah.
But it is like you're not acting the same way that you usually do. Can you tell me like what is happening inside? Like what are you thinking about? And we've again like we're not therapists, but we've learned a lot from therapy. So we actually have brought in a lot of the things that we've learned and we use them at home now. So that patient asking like, I'm not saying you're doing anything wrong. I just want to know, are you okay? What are you thinking about? How can I help?
I would say that's a great return on investment then. If you guys are able to take everything that you're learning there, I think that's the reason for therapy, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't go into therapy hoping that it solves your problems. You have to be the one to actually solve them. You have to take the
Right.
tools that are given to you and then apply them now to life when life gets hard, when situations arise, when
Mm-hmm.
trauma rears its ugly head, when a bad day turns into something else. You have to face those, and I think that's why I'm such an advocate for therapy, because you can't get enough therapy. Truly, I think it's just a matter of finding the right therapist, because
Absolutely.
there's a lot of therapy out there. It's just a matter of sticking with it long enough to actually let it be uncomfortable, do the work, and then apply that work moving forward.
Therapy for us now is more so our therapist is our fairy godfather now. Like
That's
we
what we
literally
call
call him
them.
that.
It's been 11 years. Imagine,
Same guy.
imagine like being a therapist and having someone like us come in and be like, "Oh, this happened and this happened. Now this happened," and so many times he was just like, "This is not normal. Like this is not, like where we're like, what's gonna happen next, right?" And he's like the stuff that we've been through. He's even like, this is like he has such a soft spot for us now, but I do think we have such a great relationship with him because we do implement what he says. And like it could be stuff within business, within parenting, within grief, within marriage, being able to take that stuff and utilize it and then the next time go back and be like, "Okay, so this happened, we used it and here's what happened now." Right? And yeah, like he said, now we're going only once a month because we feel like we've been able to use so many tools and it's kind of just like it's like it's a proactive versus reactive now for us, where we're just continuing to go.
Talk to me about how therapy has shaped the project and the company that you guys have now, SOS Cosmetics.
Yeah, one line that we use a lot, which therapy has been pivotal, is that we lead from our scars, not our wounds.
Ooh.
And when you're leading from your wounds, you're going to bleed out on people that did not cut you. So it took a long time for us to work through a lot of the pain so that we were able to go, now it's a scar. It's never going to go away. The scar is always going to be there, but we're not bleeding out the way we were. And yeah, so in 2021, when we were deciding like what was the culmination of our life together and what was the next step for us, it really was like we have this scar now. Like, and we've always really been able to honor Phil's mom, Phil's brother. Like, the sad part is they never even said it was domestic violence.
We
Like
still
they
have,
never even used the word domestic violence.
my
They would,
family still will say it.
in fact, when we started using it, we got a ton of pushback. Like that's not what it was. It was mental health. It's just like
Well,
so
and then
wild.
we're like, okay, guys, do you know what domestic means? Do
Yeah.
you know what violence means?
Yeah.
You put those two together,
Yeah.
domestic violence.
Absolutely, there's mental health involved.
There
And
absolutely was.
mental health, people that deal with mental health don't kill people. That, like, unless there's
Violence.
violence in addition to it. So, in thinking a little bit about what is the next step for us as we are able to lead through our scars, as we are able to like end generational violence in our family and in others, we were really pissed off because honestly, we'd been doing the work for like 11 and a half years, working in gender based violence prevention. And the numbers actually were not only not decreasing, but increasing by about 2.9% year over year. And we're like, what the fuck are we doing? Like, we have two little girls that are going to go out into this world. Like, what are we doing with zero innovative new solutions to try to fight this problem? And his mom's situation, it is a different situation because his dad was not a repeat offender. He was not a felon. Like he
Well,
didn't
he was a felon.
but for drugs, way, 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 way back.
was-
He had no
Yeah.
prior arrest to violence at all. And so
But there
a
was
lot,
violence,
what?
right?
What was
There
that?
was violence.
He was very
There
He
violent.
was
violence.
very violent,
So
but
he
no
was
one ever
not-
called the police. He choked her. He hit the kids. He threw pool. I mean, there's tons and tons of story of he made bruises. Like there's so many things, but no one ever called the police. And so there was all this conversation when we were doing this gender-based violence work where it's like, well, we need people to speak up more, and we need to do this, and we need to do that. It's like, or we need to prevent it. Like, or we need to give people the tools that when they're in this situation, they can call for help before their last words are in a 911 phone call. Like his mom's final words were in a 911 phone call. At the end of that phone call, nationally publicized, was a gun taking her life on the end of that call. And so here we are, his mom's saying, help, 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 come help me. My husband just shot my son. She's coming for me. You know, her life is over. None of our family for the entire, at this time had been just over 9 years, had even said the words domestic violence. Meanwhile, we're working in violence prevention. We're seeing trafficking. We're seeing the worst of the worst cases. And we're going, what are we doing to solve this? And so really it was like in October of 2021, we applied for a patent, and on his mom's would have been 71st birthday, October 28th, 2021, we launched in our backyard a concept of a tech-enabled lipstick and roofie test strips that we believe potentially, we have no idea if it could have saved her life, but from the experiences we've had from his mom to literally 10,000 other people in horrible situations, in violent situations, what could have helped them? What could have saved them? And we launched the concept to see if we could get support. We didn't have any savings. We had no money. We had just left an 11.5-year career with a nonprofit, which we made. That we started and made an average of like $40,000 a year for 11 years. We had nothing, but we were like, what's the next step? And how can we get the community involved? And when we announced the concept, it was like this audible,
Yeah.
like people were like, whoa, like that is such a good idea. And once we had that buy-in, we were able to raise the first 25,000 friends and family of just like, basically they were the first buyers of our product. We did like perk investments, like you get a sweatshirt and you get a lipstick. Like we don't know what you're gonna get. Yeah,
they have nothing, and sometimes
they got it a year later. They got it a year later, or like more than a year later. And once we felt like once we launched it, it felt like we were taking the culmination of our experiences of, the losses that we've had, of like even like my background's fashion and hair and makeup. Like we took that in there. We took like both of our customer service experiences, our nonprofit, and we put it all together, even to the branding. Like I've been obsessed with Betsy Johnson my entire life, and unicorns and rainbows, and like we basically
tell.
Yeah, right, exactly. We took this brand and brought it to life. It's been so hard because entrepreneurship is really hard. But there's nothing in our lives, in my opinion, that we've ever done that's felt more authentic and right
to who we are.
To who we are. And that we are truly leading out of those scars. And through that, like we are healing other people. We've done the work now to heal ourselves, to learn the lessons. And there's plenty more lessons to learn always. But in those early years of grief, right? Like you have to learn them by going through them. And the ability for us to hold space, it's so interesting. Even things like, so we talked about like my experiences, because I grew up in a, super fundamentalist Christian home. I have, there's 4 of us sisters, and all of us experienced sexual assault. And there was a lot of coming out of purity culture and lack of, basically this whole like you're causing men to stumble with your body, and like just a lot of those really, really unhealthy belief systems. And so I never ever dealt with it. Like I never even would have said like I was assaulted, I was this, like even to Phil, like, oh, we maybe have talked about it, but it was never, those words were never like, that's what happened to you, right? Or you were drugged and this is what happened to you. And so I named the colors, the 5 lip colors that we have. One of them I named We Believe You.
Wow.
And I named that because what I learned is so often people go through pain and grief, specifically within sexual and domestic violence, and they're never believed. they're asked questions like, why didn't you report? Why didn't you leave? What were you wearing? What did you have to drink? And yesterday we had, actually on one of our TikTok posts, we had go viral a news story, and one of the girls said, oh my God, I just read the "We Believe You" color and I have chills up and down my entire body. And so, and that's just a perfect example of us taking that pain of like, we weren't believed, but we believe you. We believe survivors, period.
Every time.
His mother-in-law, or my mother-in-law, his mom didn't have a chance to get help sooner. Yes, she was on the phone with 911 when it was too late. Like, it was too late. If she had our panic button, could she have just pushed when she saw him getting riled up? And we don't know. No one will ever know the amount of minutes it took. We have no idea, like, the timing or if that could have helped. But in those moments of fight or flight, what could help? How could someone come when you can't even grab a phone, right? She grabbed a phone because her life was, it was it. That was it for her. She was on the phone and her life was done. Like, could she have pushed a button? We don't know.
We don't know, but what we do know is that we know what we're doing now. We know with SOS Cosmetics. We know with what we're doing, we can help that to, if it's one other person that doesn't happen to, one other kid that doesn't have to have his mom's last words be on a 911 phone call, like that's all worth it to us.
Yep. And then when you start looking at the stats, right? So it's like we're entering generational violence in our own family, but then you start looking at it and you're like, oh my God, 1 in 3 women will experience sexual and domestic violence in their lifetime, according to World Health Organization. This is global, a global epidemic. That's 1.3 billion women already that are either are experiencing or have experienced it. 1 in 2 women have had their drink spiked. You know, we look at the kind of the nuances within violence and how perpetrators make it happen and how power and control works and how gaslighting works. Like you're the problem. I'm not even, you know, like they don't even know it's abuse a lot of times.
If you wouldn't have done that, I wouldn't have done that.
Right. Yeah.
So our lipstick colors are, we believe you. No means no. It's not the dress. Shine on, and what's our 5th one?
Hell yes, because our slogan is, if it's not a hell yes, it's a no.
So it's like this story of consent all the way up through. So our brand, like Joy and I have always been good at branding, but our brand now is more authentic to who we are because it's based on our experiences.
Yeah.
Your lipstick and your cosmetic it's incredible. As you know, you mentioned the statistics, 1 in 3 women will be assaulted or victims of domestic violence. And we've got 2 right here on this podcast who have both been either victims of assault or victims of sexual assault. And so I don't think you need to look that far. And I think, again, it goes back to people still think that it's the other. It's not happening here. It wouldn't be my own sister. It wouldn't be my own mother. It wouldn't be my own daughter. It wouldn't be this, but it is. But it is. It is your daughters. It is your sisters. It is your moms. It is the women in your life who are being assaulted. You know, you also talked about you don't know if this would have helped your mom's situation in that moment. You don't know.
Yeah.
You don't know. But here's the thing: she didn't have a product like this then. I go into like the how do you get out, right? I think of your lipstick as a gateway for women who are in these situations to find safe havens out of their relationship, because the most dangerous time for a woman when she's leaving a relationship, or for a woman in a domestic situation, is when she is leaving. That is when she is most vulnerable, when she's most exposed, and when she is at risk of literally being killed. So I think when you have a lipstick like you guys have that can help set a foundation on how to leave, how to get, you know, the text to the right people and set this up. I mean, you guys are literally creating an underground railroad for women to freedom, to safety.
Yeah.
It's incredible what you've done.
Thank you. Yeah, it's very meaningful us to hear that and to hear these people who are like, this is going to save so many lives, because so many of us have been in a situation where we're like, we have no idea how we're going to get out of this. And so, it's, you know, while every bump and bruise along the way of, you know, getting something new funded and learning how to manufacture it and getting it patented and, you know, all these things, we just keep putting one foot in front of the other. And I will say, like, I think, a lot of the trauma that we experienced, a lot of the pain, a lot of the moments to look back and where we thought we couldn't go another day, we did then and we can now. We can learn, we can take comfort in remembering who we are and who we've always been, in being able to handle all of the obstacles that life will continue to throw, because life is train tracks and there's good and bad on either side, always.
Thanks for watching, and that's okay. Join us next week on Wednesday for another episode. In the meantime, subscribe below, like, comment, and share, or find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Until next week.